I'm Eleanor. I'm sitting in the cabin by the lake. The silence around me heavy and full of unspoken truths. The air is still and the only sound is the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Just a short while ago I discovered the truth about my late husband David, and it has turned my world upside down. David and I were a middle-class couple. We lived in a cozy house in the suburbs of Chicago. He was a quiet, hard-working accountant and I was a school teacher. We had a daughter, Lily, who was busy building her career in New York. Our life together was filled with the ordinary rhythms of work, family dinners, and weekend outings. After David's funeral, I returned to our empty house. It felt like a shell of what it used to be. His clothes still hung in the closet and his favorite books were still on the shelf. But there was an emptiness, a void that nothing could fill. The medical bills started piling up and I realized that our savings were quickly dwindling. One asset that we had was a small cabin in the mountains of Colorado. David had always been insistent on keeping it even though we rarely talked about it. He would go there alone on weekends saying that the quiet helped him clear his mind. I never questioned him as it seemed easier not to. But now with our financial situation becoming dire, I knew I had to sell it. I called the real estate agent and made an appointment to discuss listing the property. As I ended the call, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a wrong decision, but practicality seemed to leave me no choice. In the days that followed, I found myself drowning in memories of our life together. David had always been a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He was reliable, always there when I needed him. We had a good life, or so I thought. It was only in the last few years that things started to change. David began leaving town more often, driving to the cabin on Friday evenings and returning late on Sunday nights. He said the city was too crowded, that he needed the peace of the mountains. I didn't argue, as I was busy with my own work and the constant care of my aging mother. He started to cough a lot, a dry, persistent cough that followed him everywhere. He dismissed it as allergies at first, then as a lingering cold. He also seemed more tired, sitting down more often and moving slower. I noticed these changes, but I assumed it was just the result of his age and work stress. One morning, I found him in the bathroom with a shaved head. He said it was easier to maintain, and I believed him. After all, many men his age do the same thing. When I asked about his health, he always gave me reasonable answers, saying that it was just a minor issue that the doctor was keeping an eye on. I trusted him, as I had for our entire marriage. Our daughter, Lily, was mostly absent during these years. She was focused on her studies and then her career. Phone calls replaced visits, and holidays became shorter. I told myself that it was normal, that children grow up and move on. But there was a part of me that felt a growing irritation, a sense that David was choosing the cabin over us. I remember the evenings when I would try to talk to him and he would seem distant, as if his mind was somewhere else. I would get frustrated, and there were times when I would give him a sharp look or a curt word. He never responded, just absorbed my anger without a word. I thought he was being indifferent, but now I realize how wrong I was. When I drove to the cabin with the real estate agent, I noticed that it looked better than I remembered. The lawn was trimmed, the porch was clean, and the windows were clear. It was as someone had been taking care of it regularly. A sense of unease settled in my chest. As we walked around the cabin, an old man named Henry stepped out from the neighboring property. I recognized him as the neighbor David had mentioned in passing. When the real estate agent mentioned that we were planning to sell the cabin, Henry's expression changed. He told me to wait, that there were things I didn't know. Curiosity and a bit of fear got the better of me, and I followed Henry into the woods behind the cabin. There we came across a small storage shed. It was locked with multiple heavy locks, and the hardware looked new and well-maintained. When Henry opened the door, I was shocked. Inside was a small, orderly room filled with medical equipment. There was an oxygen concentrator, a portable force stand, and shelves full of medical supplies. It was a place clearly designed for medical care. Henry then told me the truth. 3 years ago, David had collapsed near the dock. He had insisted on driving himself to a clinic instead of calling for an ambulance. After a series of tests, he was diagnosed with advanced cancer. David didn't want me or Lily to know. He was afraid that we would worry, that our lives would be turned upside down. So he decided to seek alternative treatments outside of the hospital. He came to the cabin every weekend for treatment, carefully managing his illness so that he could continue to live a normal life at home. The shaved head, I now realized, was his way of taking control. He didn't want us to see the physical signs of his illness. He wanted to spare us the pain and worrying. As I sat in the chair in that room, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had trusted him blindly, never suspecting the burden he was carrying alone. I had been so focused on my own life that I had failed to see the truth. I found David's journal in a drawer. It was wrapped in a simple canvas sleeve. As I opened it, I saw his familiar handwriting. The early entries were clinical, recording his symptoms and the medications he was taking. But as the pages went on, his words became more personal. He wrote about his fear of being a burden, of becoming someone I would have to take care of. He described the pain he endured in silence, breathing through it so that I wouldn't notice. He wrote about the difficult decision to keep his illness a secret, weighing the short-term pain of telling us against the long-term suffering he wanted to spare us. Reading his words, I felt as if I was getting to know him all over again. I realized that his silence was not a sign of indifference, but an act of love. He had sacrificed so much to protect us. Lily arrived at the cabin later that day. She was angry when she found out that I had canceled the sale of the cabin. I took her to the storage shed and showed her the truth. At first, she refused to believe it. She thought it was a mistake, that David would never keep such a secret from us. But when I showed her the journal, she began to read. Her expression changed as she absorbed the words. She started to cry, realizing how wrong she had been about her father. We sat on the floor together, holding each other. The resentment and anger that had built up over the years began to melt away. We understood that David's actions were driven by love, a love that was quiet and selfless. We also found a legal document that David had prepared. In it, he requested that the cabin be turned into a short-term support retreat for cancer patients. He wrote about the need for a place where patients could rest and recover without the impersonal environment of a hospital. It was then that I realized that David had been planning this all along. He had been building something meaningful, even in the face of his illness. The cabin was not a place of escape. It was a place of hope and care. We decided not to sell the cabin. Instead, we started to transform it into the retreat that David had envisioned. I reached out to a local doctor whose name David had mentioned in his journal. He was enthusiastic about the idea and offered his help. Gradually, other people joined us, a nurse and a social worker. Patients started to arrive, tired and in need of rest. We provided them with a quiet place to stay, simple meals, and a listening ear. As time passed, Lily's perspective on her future changed. She decided to pursue a career in healthcare, wanting to help others in the same way David had helped himself. The cabin became a place of healing, not just for the patients, but for us as well. The grief that had once consumed me began to take on a different form. It was still there, but it was now intertwined with a sense of purpose and the memory of a man who had loved us in the most profound way. Now, as I sit here by the lake, I look out at the water and think of David. I know that his love will always be with me, guiding me through the rest of my life. The silence that once felt like a wall between us is now a reminder of the depth of a sacrifice and the strength of his love.